Well, this week, the Financial Intelligence Centre, in collaboration with the European Union, has launched a week-long national risk assessment workshop. The initiative focuses on evaluating how Namibia identifies, assesses and responds to risks related to money laundering, terrorism financing and proliferation financing. National risk assessments are critical tools that help countries understand their vulnerabilities within the financial system, as well as develop targeted strategies to prevent illicit financial flows. And an increasingly interconnected global economy, strengthening these systems is not only a national priority, but also an international obligation. To help us unpack what this workshop means for Namibia, how serious these risks are, and what progress has been made so far, we're joined by Dr. Brian Asep, the Director of the FIC. Dr. Asep, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Nina. Good evening to all the viewers and to all the listeners.
Thank you so much for being here. Well, I want to start with the basics, Dr. Asep. What exactly is a national risk assessment, and talk to us about why it's important for Namibia at this time?
The national risk assessment is a comprehensive assessment of what are the money laundering risks, the threats and the vulnerabilities in a particular country, and Namibia is no exception. So it's really a multi-sectoral approach where we try to identify what are the key risks within a particular country, in our case in Namibia. So it's not just Namibia that does it, it's really being done by most countries globally, and it's to ensure that once we have identified the key risks, the threats and the vulnerabilities, we make appropriate resource allocations to address and mitigate those risks, address the vulnerabilities, and ensure that there is sufficient capacity building to enhance the capacity across the spectrum and ensure that we address the risk of money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing.
Well, talk to us then about, the specific risks that Namibia then faces.
So if you look back in our history in terms of how we address money laundering as a national risk, in 2012 we had our first national risk assessment, and this is a tool that is periodically updated, usually around 3 to 4 years, and that was updated around 2015, 2016, with another comprehensive risk assessment that was done in 2022, updated then on a targeted basis in 2023. So if you look at our national risk assessment, and what it tells us as a country is that our risk and vulnerabilities is situated in corruption as a predicate offense or as an underlying offense. It is situated in trade-based money laundering or illicit trade. It sits within wildlife or environmental crimes. And it also has shown us that fraud is also one of the predicate offenses that has a risk, an inherent risk for money laundering and terrorism financing and proliferation financing.
Well, you're collaborating with the European Union on this workshop. What does this partnership bring to the table, Dr. Asep?
So you will recall that immediately after Namibia was grey-listed in 2024, we obviously looked around and wanted to partner with credible stakeholders that has an experience in addressing, first of all, our grey listing, but at the same time also ensure that we do build long-lasting, sustainable capacity within the countries. So the partnership essentially was formed at that time, and this is the longitudinal nature of our partnership with the EU because of the fact that they do have the expertise, and we wanted to make sure that when we build capacity across the various institutions that are responsible for ensuring and implementing our national money laundering framework, that we do learn and capacitate those individuals and institutions from the best in the world. So the EU has graciously agreed to partner with Namibia, and they do it on a multi-year process. For example, Namibia is, I think, one of about 40 countries in Africa that has partnered with the EU to conduct various initiatives under our money laundering framework, which the National Risk Assessment is but one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, talk to us about how Namibia is currently identifying and monitoring suspicious financial activities across sectors.
So you really want me to give away our trade
Well,
secrets?
do it as eloquently as possible.
I think there's quite a number of mechanisms in place that we have as a country. First of all, if you look at the Financial Intelligence Act, it has predominantly three elements. The first one obviously being from a preventative side of things, and that's probably where your question comes in. And then there's the combative side of things and enforcement. So those are really the three high-level aspects that the Financial Intelligence Act and associated laws tries to cover.
Yeah.
So from a preventative side of things, there is what we call accountable institutions and reporting institutions. Accountable institutions you will typically find within the financial sector. Yeah. These are naturally your banks, amongst others. And they have what we call transaction monitoring systems. So if there's any suspicious transaction in terms of the parameters that they set for identifying such, they would naturally report it to the Financial Intelligence Center. We will do our magic to either confirm whether it is suspicious transactions for money laundering or whether it's merely a suspicious activity. And once that is confirmed, we obviously deal with it within the ambit of the law.
Yeah. Are there particular industries or sectors that have been identified to be more vulnerable to financial crimes?
Absolutely. So if you look at our 2023 updated risk assessment, we found that corporate structures are being abused. You know, it's multi-layered corporate structures, close corporations and companies that are multi-layered. And behind those layers, money normally gets laundered, especially into the real estate sector. So those responsible for money laundering would buy luxury properties and hide the proceeds of the predicate crimes behind those real estate. And we have also found that in other areas, for example, in trade-based money laundering, we found that there is quite significant money laundering taking place.
How does the outcome of this assessment, Dr. Aseb, influence policy decisions as well as, regulatory reforms?
I think that's a very important question, Nina, because that's ultimately the purpose. Apart from the National Risk Assessment being a tool that identify, the most risk-prone and threats and vulnerable sectors, it places the country in a position to enable policy decision and forward-looking policy decision in terms of how do we deal with money laundering in the future? What are the threats and the vulnerabilities? And through the Anti-Money Laundering Council, which has a multi-sectoral representation, we are then able to advise. For example, one topical issue is the virtual assets and service providers, commonly referred to as Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin per se, but, Bitcoin is one of them. So it's really for us to understand what are the risks, what are the threats and the vulnerabilities associated. Another aspect is the betting industry, where we have to understand what are the risks associated with this industry. We have the faith-based organizations. While we know that NPOs and faith-based organizations do play a very important role within any country and the economy as well, we also want to ensure that they are not abused for ulterior purposes.
Right.
And at the same time strike a balance that we do not want to have unintended consequences that stifle or hinder the good work that they do. So it's really a multi-sectoral. If you look at the participants that is congregating over this 1 week, it's from private sector, it's public sector, it's various role players that are involved and taking responsibility for the country's money laundering framework.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Isip, that's it. Dr. Isip, that's all the time we have this evening. But thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Nina. Have a good one.